So as I mentioned, let's talk about this Kentucky game. Alabama plays Kentucky, and Alabama wins by a score of 96-83. I know when I gave my prediction on the podcast, I said 96-88. When I recorded the podcast, just so that y'all are aware, I recorded the podcast, and I was not 100% certain if Jackson Robinson or Lamont Butler were going to play. Then when I wrote the thread, I knew at that moment that they were both fully out, right? Kentucky had put them on the availability report as not going to play. So I actually changed my prediction for the thread that went out, and I said 96-84. This final was 96-83. So I can say pretty honestly and confidently that I had a pretty good idea how this game was going to go. I thought that overall Alabama had a really, really good bounce back. This was one of our better defensive performances of the year. Alabama, had an issue at the start of this game. Didn't love how this game started. We did see some new things out of Nate Oates, and they, was talked about in the press conference. He had 8 substitutions in the first 6 minutes, and he was asked about that, and he was, basically saying he's going to have a zero tolerance policy as it relates to the scouting report, as it relates to guys just missing assignments, as it relates to effort. He's less concerned if you're missing shots, but if you're having dumb turnovers, if you're just missing very obvious scouting report issues, then that's something you're going to get pulled for, right? The first of those was LeBaron Philon got pulled at the very beginning of the game for Aiden Holloway. They kind of got pulled for each other at moments in this game. They let Kobe Brea get off a 3-point shot that, they went under a screen that they shouldn't have, weren't fighting through certain screens. And so that's something that Nate's, going to put a kind of a zero tolerance on, and something that he wants to work on. Another thing that Nate kind of talked about, and I think this is something that's pretty important, is he explained that the reason why he entered LeBaron back into the starting lineup is he wanted Mark to be able to play off the ball a little bit more and have Mark trust LeBaron to get him the ball, similar to how Mark was able to trust Aaron Estrada last year to get him the ball, right? He's still going to get his points. He's still going to get his shots. He's still going to be able to create in the offense, but he doesn't have to be that main and only primary ball handler. And so we saw a little bit more of that out of LeBaron Philon. And so because of that, Mark Sears actually has his second back-to-back 30-point game. Mark was super great in this game. When I wrote that thread, Mark Sears had been probable on the report, so I was, pretty sure that he was going to play, but I wasn't sure how injured or why he was on that report. Comes to find out he was okay. I'm thinking it was just more of a precautionary thing to throw him on the report. But he was okay. He does end up playing in this game, plays phenomenally well, scores 30 points on pretty efficient shooting. Does well when he got to the line. Played one of his better defensive performances. It was far from perfect. He had a alley-oop that he threw toward the end of the game that was kind of ill-advised. Nate was asked about it, and he thought that Mark was trying to get Cliff his points for his double-double, but, really, applauded for how well he locked in on the defensive end because he got a steal immediately thereafter, and then hits a pull-up 3 to kind of ice the game away and put it up to 12, right? So I thought Mark Sears, he's one that I didn't I obviously wanted to see a big bounce back game for him, or kind of building on his previous 30-point game against Missouri. But I thought that his defensive performance and how he played was absolutely awesome. Not somebody I really highlighted in the thread, but I wanted to make sure to shout him out here because, like I said, I was a little unsure on how much he was going to play. But he did play incredibly, incredibly well. Another guy that I think you have to highlight when you look at this game for Alabama's side has to be Cliff Amore. He was efficient. He scored 11 points from the field. I know a lot of those were dunks. But the big thing for me is Cliff grabbed 15 rebounds. And at his size and at his physicality, that's something that we're going to need out of him moving forward, right? You're going to need somebody that can grab 3 offensive rebounds. You need somebody that can grab all those defensive rebounds. He has the length, the athleticism, the physicality to be able to go up with these guys. That's what you're going to need out of Cliff. That kind of thing is awesome when you can see it out of a guy like Cliff. It really helps the team. Obviously, he's not as quick, moving in transition, but just being able to seal off a possession, get a putback. I know one of them was a putback dunk that he got an offensive rebound, was able to get the dunk putback. Stuff like that is something that really helps this offense flow, especially on that offensive end. And when you get 15 rebounds out of a guy like Cliff, cause him to win the hard hat. He was fighting, doing everything he could to get those rebounds. And I thought that was just probably one of his better games that he's played for us this season. Super efficient, awesome double-double, really proud of how he played in this game. Some other guys that I think that just need to be highlighted, Aden Holloway. I talked about him. I thought that this game would fit his skill set pretty well just due to how fast he plays. And I thought that with the guard issues that Kentucky is dealing with the injuries to Butler and Robinson, you were going to see a lot of playing time out of guys like Chandler and Perry and Noah. And I just honestly did not have faith that they were going to be able to stay in front of guys like Mark Sears and Aden Holloway. And I was accurate, right? Mark Sears and Aden Holloway at moments in this game were able to kind of get to their spots and do what they wanted to do. Perry and Noah and Chandler just are not fast enough to stay in front of guys like this. And when they're thrust into the starting lineup and don't have the time under their belt that a guy like Butler or Robinson does, it's a tough position to put them in. No shame on them. It's a freshman put in a spot that they were not expected to be in at the beginning of the season. And unfortunately, due to injuries, they were in that spot. I thought that Aden played a really good game. He even, to say he shot it poorly, it would be inaccurate. He goes 5 of 12 from 3, but honestly, some of the threes that he missed were threes that you actually don't expect Aden to miss. Quite a few of those were open. They were even down and outs. I thought Aden played a really good game, was taking pretty good shots. He only ends up with 1 turnover. I thought that overall, like I said, I thought he played a pretty good game. It was one of the better defensive performances I've seen out of Aden. Was he out of position at certain moments? Sure. There were a couple of things where he, gambled a little bit for the steal, hoping that his quickness was going to be able to get him a steal. I know on one of those he was able to get a steal. On one of those he went for a jump, and I thought he tipped the pass, but he didn't. And then a back cut from the guy he was defending ended up getting a pretty easy score for Kentucky. But I felt that it was an intensity and a defensive effort that was being shown. Maybe a couple of them were channeled in the wrong place, but it happens. I'm not all that concerned when you are trying that hard and you gamble a little bit because that is something that if it does work out for Alabama, that kind of fuels our offense and stuff like that. You saw LeBaron Fallon get one of those in this game. He gets a steal and a dunk on the other end. So, I was not super concerned when Aden did stuff like that, but I really liked the defensive effort that we saw him show. A couple other guys that I thought that played really well. I thought Mo played really well. Not his craziest game from a rebounding or scoring perspective, but I thought that in general he did play pretty well. I'm curious to see how Mo ends up going forward. Obviously, the Mississippi State game, which we'll talk about here in a few minutes, was one of his best games that he's played for Alabama. I think he had 9 rebounds, and it was one of his better scoring games as well. But he is dealing with a little bit of a thumb issue. I'm not sure how much it's affecting him. I know in the Auburn game, he had his thumb taped up. In this game, he didn't start with his thumb being taped, but then as some of y'all may know, I kind of sit towards behind the bench, and Clark was taping up his thumb, that same left thumb that he was having issues with previously. So I'm not sure if that's impacting him. I know Nate had talked about giving some guys some rest, not going as hard. I'm hoping that may be able to help the guys recover, because I think multiple guys at this point are dealing with injuries, similar to a guy like Grant Nelson. Grant didn't have his best performance ever in this game. A lot of people have talked about him kind of going away. He was in foul trouble for a lot of this game. But he also, it seemed like he was dealing with a little bit of back issues as well. He had a heating pad on his back a lot of the time that he was sitting on the bench, also a knee brace on. So again, not sure how much that's affecting him. It seemed like when he was playing, he was moving okay. There was one layup that usually you would see Grant dunk, and he ended up just laying it in. It didn't seem like he had quite the hops that he has in some other games. So I'm not sure if that's limiting him to what level, but when he was in for certain moments, he was playing pretty well, especially toward the end of the game. I think that he was being aggressive enough to be able to put the 5th foul on a guy like Oweh or a guy like Chandler. Alabama being able to hold Oweh, for example, to the scoring that they held him to in this game. I know Kentucky fans are going to look at it as, he fouled out. Sure. He also played 22 minutes and shot 1 of 9 from the field, right? 1 of 9 from the field is poor shooting, no matter if you're getting called for fouls or not, right? So there is a situation where Alabama being able to hold the better scorer from Kentucky that actually made us pay a lot in that first game, I thought was really big, right? It was somebody that was able to create a lot of havoc in game one. And the fact that Alabama was able to limit what impact he was able to have on this game was big, because he was somebody that in Rupp Arena I thought was having a lot of success. And, like I said, Alabama holding him to 1 of 9 from 3, 1 of 9 from the field is something that you really, really like to see. Nate talked about, their game plan was to leave Carr open. I didn't particularly love that idea as a game plan. I talked about in this game that I was a little concerned, because oftentimes when you see a guy that fouls out or is in a lot of foul trouble in game one, that you kind of forget about him in game two. It didn't sound like that was what happened. It sounded like it was more of a game plan thing. But, I often worry about that, because it seems like in game two, a lot of times you'll see that person have a much larger impact. And I thought that Carr would be able to have an impact. And because, we had left him open and he hit his shots, Carr was able to have a pretty large impact, especially in the beginning part of this game. He had 17 points. I mean, he honestly played a pretty good game. And I thought that he was able to impact this game, obviously, a lot more than he did in that first one. The other guy, obviously, Kobe Brea, we talked about how good of a shooter he is. He shot to his average at 4 of 10. In a perfect world, we don't let him get off that many shots. That's something that Nate talked about. He wants to see how they were able to get off some of those shots. But this is a situation where, limiting somebody that has that ability is something that's going to have to be a key moving forward. And that's another one of those locking into the scouting report things. I know at least one of the threes that Brea had, the three that Colin Chandler had, were threes that Alabama went under screens, and instead of trying to fight and go over them, right? Trying to fight and stay close. And that's something where clearly it was not in the scouting report. I know, I think Hunter Johnson said something about, not Hunter, I'm sorry, Michael Harper said something in our Discord about, Jaren going under the screen on the Colin Chandler one at the end. And I made a comment because Nate was yelling at him immediately thereafter, and it looked like before that possession, he had even told him, like, hey, you got 5, you've got 5, stay on him. And then he didn't, right? Jaren went in the way he shouldn't have, gave up the shot. Chandler hits the shot to his credit, right? So those are the situations where I think Alabama just has to be a little bit more locked into what the scouting report says, who the shooters are, how you're supposed to defend each guy, because the way we were defending Carr was not the same way you should defend Travis Perry. It's not the same way you should defend Kobe Brea. And I think that Alabama at times gets a little lackadaisical, and that's something that Nate's trying to put up much more of an emphasis on. The last thing that I'm going to talk about, and I just want to mention it because I personally thought that it was funny, and I even asked some Kentucky fans leaving the stadium about it, and they did not find any issue with it. But the Alabama student section was chanting USA at Amari Williams when he was at the free throw line. And some of the Kentucky beat reporters with KSR seemed pretty upset by this, that, thought that it was childish, chanting USA at somebody just because he was from the UK, especially since Alabama has a guy that plays or is from Nigeria. I asked the Kentucky fans after the game, like I said, we were walking back to our cars from the arena, and I was like, hey, I saw this on Twitter. People were mad about it. I just curious, like, you're a Kentucky fan. Tell me what you think. And the guy and his wife were basically like, hey, if he hits his free throws, they probably stop saying that. Now, Amari Williams goes 7 of 10 from the line, so he did not have a super poor shooting night by any stretch of the imagination. But it is a true statement that when the students started doing it, he did miss 2 early free throws. And so in his mind, he was like, hey, like, I thought that it's, not nearly the worst thing you've ever heard a student section chant. It was kind of funny. But, if he hits his shots, then, that kind of all solves itself. So I wanted to address it just because I thought that it was kind of odd. I didn't think it was the worst thing I've ever heard, obviously. I thought that it was kind of just childish fun. But that's a lot of what student sections are, right? Like, Alabama chants Bruce is fat. Like, at Bruce Pearl, right? These are things that, FBI Will Wade, right? All of these things are just a student section trying to have fun, and when you've got a guy on the line from the UK and you're chanting USA, I don't think that it's the craziest thing ever. Maybe I'm wrong when I say that, but I thought that it was just kind of all a part of the game and not something that had any like ill intentions towards it. So that was kind of my thoughts on that. Just wanted to say that because I thought that it was odd that some of the beat reporters for Kentucky were bringing it up and thought that it was some major issue in this game. Like I said, that's what I want to say about this game. I thought that Alabama in general played to their game plan. I thought that Alabama obviously still needs to work on the scouting report a little bit, needs to clean up the turnovers just a little bit. Obviously has some things they need to fix and that they need to clean up and work on. But I thought this was one of Alabama's better defensive performances for large parts of this game. Obviously, you need to clean up the starts to the game, and I'm sure Nate and co are going to try to figure out what's causing that. But I do think that Alabama had a much better game plan and a much better intensity to them on defense this game than they have in some others. So really, really proud to see that. Awesome win to sweep the Cats in for the season. And, obviously you just keep winning and hope that Auburn drops like at least one more game. And if so, then you can set up a showdown in Auburn Arena for at least a share of the SEC title, right? So we don't control our own destiny, but you just got to keep winning and hope that the rest of the chips fall where they may. So that's what I have to say about that game. We will talk about the Mississippi State game, and then we'll get out of here.